Breakthrough Real Estate Investing Podcast, episode 91.
Hello and welcome to the Breakthrough Real Estate Investing Podcast. We put this show together to inspire you and help you break through to the life that you want to live through the power of real estate investing. My name is Rob Brake, and here with me again is Sandy McKay. What's going on, Sandy?
Hey, another day, more chaos, more fun, and same old, I suppose.
Sounded tired there. You're just like, ah.
No, I'm not actually. I'm good. I'm pumped, ready. Got a good guest, ready to create some good, cool stuff here again, as always. How about you?
Things are going great, man. Things are going good. I just got back from the gym. I'm feeling pumped, so ready to do this.
Life's always good in real estate, right? Everything's always up. Everything's good.
Well, I mean, you got to find a way to make that the case, I guess, when you're an investor.
Yeah.
Make lemonade.
Yeah. I mean, before we get into the interview, we want to just, of course, mention to everyone to go over to breakthroughrealpodcast.ca, sign up for our newsletter there, check out all of our episodes. You can comment, share them, all that. Also get a free tool there, our ultimate strategy for building wealth through real estate. You get a free little report there for yourself to help you get going with your real estate investing, and you'll get on our list so you never miss out on an episode, you never miss out on an event we're doing, all that sort of fun stuff. So go throw your info in there, and let's communicate a little more often.
Say, that free gift, what is that again? And what are they going to learn? What are they going to find out?
They're going to learn how you and I make a ton of money in real estate, and about every other person that we know. The ultimate guide to it. The strategy that most newbies don't know, but they can with the right team members put into action and make a reality for themselves. Nice.
Okay. So anyone who hasn't gotten that free gift yet, go on over there. It is free, like we said. I think we said it's free. So go on over and get it, pick it up. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll learn from the best people that we know. What else? I think everyone should go over to iTunes as well. Write us a review. We always love hearing from you guys, what you want to hear more of, what maybe you think that we could change, questions you want answered, anything like that. Just go over to iTunes and leave us a review. It really helps. We've got, I think close to 250 reviews on there. So I want to thank everybody who's done that so far. It really does help us out. Helps people go into iTunes and looking for this kind of content, be able to find it and learn from all of the guests that we have on. So thanks a lot for that, and go over to iTunes and leave us a review. What else?
What else? Yeah, what else? I don't know. Do we got anything else to go through, or we get into the show, into the interview?
Well, I mean, again, since we put out episodes pretty close together, we haven't done too much development in this, but you and I are in talks. I mean, not in negotiations or anything like that, but we are talking about planning a live event for the podcast. Yeah. So we're looking forward to having more information on that coming soon, but we're thinking it's going to be, we're going to try and make it a little bit of a bigger thing where we can rent some kind of a hall somewhere and have some really good guests that people would be interested in coming to see live, get their ear, be able to ask them questions, which is something that people don't really get to do when it comes to this kind of format, right? Because we don't have a call-in time or anything like that for the guests. So I think a live event would be really interesting in that whoever we're talking to, the guests that are there, the audience members for that show would be able to pick their brain and ask them any questions that they want. So I think it's going to be a really interesting event. And I'm looking forward to having more information on it. Probably in September sometime.
Yeah, it'll be towards the ending of 2019, somewhere in there. And I suppose people can keep listening to every episode, and we'll update them as we get closer. And definitely something that we want to see a lot of people out to. A lot of people that have maybe listened to us for a long time and have never met in person. It'd be great to see them come out. I think we're going to have some amazing guests and content for the day there. And yeah. We'll talk more as we get closer through the summer and into the 2019.
Yeah, and I mean, we are working pretty hard on getting some really interesting guests for that. And if it goes well, then we'll try and do some more.
Absolutely.
I've talked to a couple of people, and they seem to think it's a good idea. So, hopefully others will be interested in it as well. So again, stay tuned, and we'll give you updates as they develop.
Mm-hmm.
So today we are super pumped to have Savio Almeida, right? Almeida. Let me start again. Today we are super pumped to have Savio Almeida joining us, and he's going to be talking to us about Detroit fix and flips, something we've never talked about before. Also U.S. buy and holds, and we don't get into that very much either. So this is going to be a very, very interesting, I think, untouched sort of territory that we're getting into here today. So thanks for joining us, Savio.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. And I'll read a quick bio here of yourself, and then you can add to it if you feel like you need to. Savio's, like we said, we're going to talk a little bit about Detroit fix and flips and some stuff in the U.S. there. Savio got into that after immigrating to Canada in 2013 via 51 countries. So he's got to explain what that means. Savio couldn't find a job that replaced the income from the one he left. And so coming from an entrepreneurial family, Savio decided that it was time he started his own thing. And he went through a process there, wasting 6 months talking to franchisors, started Oakville, Butler, and Office Boys, and a residential commercial cleaning company. And the plan was to scale up quickly by hiring the best people, having the best systems. And 3 years later, scrubbing in the toilet of one of his clients' homes because nobody showed up to work. And Savio realized something had to change. So luckily for him, found a cool event. Tony Robbins was in town. It was Pitbull. He went and checked out that Real Estate Wealth Expo. And the rest, they say, is history. A couple years later, Savio is now a full-time investor. He's got his own niche that we're going to get into today, learn a little bit more about that. And he's one of the only, maybe the only Canadian investing in Detroit while still living in Canada. And he definitely loves to help others maximize their returns by taking the physical risk of investing in Detroit. And he's also wanting to get his audience to know how they can do the same. So we're going to share all sorts of stuff around that today in the interview. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. That's a lot of information about me. I just opened my whole book there, it seems. But before we get started, I just want to say a couple of things here. I mean, starting off with the thanks to both you, Rob and Sandy, for what you guys do, because as a investor who's already in the game, it's so important to have us out over here and share our stories. And I know the value of that, and I know what's going to happen right after this podcast broadcast. Right, I'm going to get all these calls. So thank you for that. Thank you. I'm honored to be on this interview. And then for the ones who are listening as well, like newbie investors, right? I mean, you're coming out and doing something that a lot of investors who are there in the market today are not doing. You're giving back to the community. So from every one of us, I want to thank you, because not a lot of people do that. And it's so important. Education is expensive, but what you guys are doing is, giving back to the community for free in your podcast, right? So I can't stress the importance of listening to these things if you're a newbie investor or if you're an existing investor already in the game, because the information that you get from these things is so, so valuable. And the energy that you gain from listening to this thing once you're done listening is you get pumped up, right? So again, Thank you so much. You guys are doing a great job, and long may it continue.
Yeah, and I mean, man, we get a lot out of it too, because we get to talk to guys like you and all of our past guests, and then once we're like, Sandy and I will spend some time on the call usually after we're done, and just talk about, man, like all the stuff we learned, or how pumped up somebody was, or whatever, and it's great. So yeah, thank you. Really appreciate you saying that. Now, let's talk about how you got started in REI. I know. Okay. Well, actually, let's go back to the bio and talk about. You said you immigrated to Canada in 20. I'm going to correct you, Sandy. You said 2013, but it was 2015.
No, 2013. Sandy was right there.
Why does mine say 2015?
Yeah, that's a typo.
Okay. Okay. So 2013 via 51 countries. What does that mean?
Yes, sir. So I had in my previous life, I had the the luxury of working for a multinational company, where basically I traveled the world. So, I was positioned, physically positioned in 3 countries. I started off in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. I got moved over to our headquarters in Switzerland. I stayed there for 4 years. Amazing time. And then we got moved over to Kazakhstan in the eastern part of, former Soviet Union, but now it's its own country. We were there for another 4 years. But whilst we were there, my job allowed me to travel. So I was a global audit manager for this food packaging company, which meant that I had to go and visit these countries and see what they're doing and recommend improvements for their businesses. So I visited 51 countries. I say it's usually the taxi tour because you're going from the hotel to the office and back, but yeah, I've set my foot down in 51 countries.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so that's not the story of immigrating to Canada though, through 51 countries somehow. But no, that sounds very, very interesting. So why did you decide to come here then?
You know what? I was recently married. We were in Kazakhstan, Russian-speaking country. Great people, great experience, right? Very friendly. But my wife was like, "Listen, man, if you want to have any babies with me, you got to take me to a country that speaks English, right?" And that's it. So we had already put our papers in a few years ago, and we were coming to the crossroads. So at that point, my stint in Kazakhstan was over, and our next assignment was in Paris, in France. And you would think, oh my God, like young couple, the city of love, you got perfume, you got wine, you got everything possible, right? But the wife was like, nope, they speak French there. I don't speak French. If you want to have my babies, you got to go. You got to take me somewhere. So yeah, I mean, it's about finding out why. And at that time, I was ready to settle down, man, in the sense of, have a family and get this thing going, right? So we took the tough decision. And I would say it is a tough decision because, we were doing really, really well, financially speaking. But I looked around and I saw all these other guys who were doing what I was doing, professional expats. That's what we were called. And some of them, at the end of like 60 years, they were still doing that. They were traveling so much and they had no roots down. So we decided to take another route, and here we are.
Now, where'd you grow up?
So I grew up, originally I'm from India. Right, so my parents are from India, even though my name doesn't say that. Portuguese roots.
Portuguese name, yeah.
Yeah. India, as you know, has been colonized for centuries, right? From all over Europe, mainly British, but there was Portuguese there too. So that's my descendants. But I actually grew up in Dubai, in the Middle East. Where everybody drives a red Ferrari and oil field in the backyard.
Yeah. That's the general consensus, right?
Yeah. And actually, we might touch on this later, but you have to understand the culture that I grew up in, right? So very much multicultural, like Toronto, I would say, because you had a lot of immigrants coming there. Well, not even immigrants, but a lot of transients people coming there, right? So you couldn't get citizenship in the country. The local population, I think, is 5% of the total population. So really small local people. No financial systems in place. We're talking about the 70s, 80s, brand new country, really, right? So they were finding their feet. They were growing, rapid growth. We've all heard the story about Dubai. But living there, there was no such thing as credit, for example, right? And this is super important in my story later. Maybe we'll touch on that because I had no concept of credit and bad credit or good credit, or how do you get financing and things like that. Everything was cash. Everything was cash, right? And cash is cool. So yeah, it was a different life for sure. And it was a bit of a shock when I moved out of there. I actually went to school in Florida for university, and it was a bit of a shock. My first time out of the country and moving to North America. So,
Is your wife from Canada?
No, she's from India as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So what would make you decide then to settle in Canada?
Going back to to growing up in Dubai, you're talking about, what was that, 90s, so mid-90s, 95, that explosion of growth was not there yet, right? It was about to happen. But here I am, 17 years old, and I just graduated out of high school, and the only thing that we had on TV, which was not a local channel, was MTV. So everything was, was US based in the sense of the media that we were exposed to. So it was every kid's dream at that point to do their university in the States or North America, right? So some couldn't get into the States and some Canada and whatnot. And I had a lot of friends. So I myself went to Florida. Some of my friends went to Canada. In my case, I went back to Dubai to start my professional career, but a lot of my friends stayed on. So I used to come back and forth when I was, before I got married and whatnot, to Toronto a lot. My best buddy was here. I'm still here now in Kitchener-Waterloo, but, come and have holidays over here. So really liked the culture. I felt really comfortable. A lot of multinationals, again, something that I was used to, not just one type of people. Obviously, I grew up in a British school, or I went to school in a British school. So all of those factors, made me feel that, okay, eventually I want to come back. I wanted to come back to North America. This much I knew, right? Canada is much easier from an immigration point of view than US. So that's pretty much that story.
What do you think of the weather, the rain and the snow and the cold?
Man, I love it. I grew up in one season. It was summer, 12 months of the year, what we consider summer, right? And it was hot. So here we have 4 seasons. You can't go wrong. I've been here now 6 years, and trust me, I've been around the world. There's the best freaking country in the world, man. For what we have, what we get here, there's no comparison. Absolutely.
Sandy, was everybody born on the wrong side of the world? Like, do we just all need to switch? Maybe that would solve all of our problems.
We'd be grateful, more grateful probably for everyone's a little bit ungrateful in general, I think, because they don't have perspective on it, right?
The grass is greener.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. Now, okay, let's talk about real estate investing then. And so we touched on it a little bit. You went to I guess you went to this real estate thing with Tony Robbins, Pitbull, and that started your interest in REI. But how did you what were your first steps? How did you get started?
Well, I get asked this question a lot now because, I'm big on social media and people who want to start off, ask this question, and I keep thinking about it. And obviously the easy answer is, I had a business, it was hard and so on and so forth. But recently I started going deeper and trying to analyze myself and why I do what I do, right? So I want to take it back to when I went to school in Florida. I left Dubai, 17 years old. Like, what do you know, right? A guy 17 years old, you go there, and we're coming. My father was a worker, right? So he worked in a paint international paint company in the accounting department, and he stayed there, I think, like for 40 years, right? Same job, consistent income, and that's all I knew, right? So, and he saved every single penny. So we were middle class, but we were not high middle class. We were definitely not low middle class. We were like, I would say middle of the middle, right? And then, so he saved a lot of money, obviously, just banked it every single penny of it to send my sister and I to college, right, in the States. And when I got to university, I got there, he said, listen, man, we're paying for your education. You're an international student. It costs much, much more than, the locals pay. We're paying for your accommodation. We don't have a lot of money to give you to spend every month, right? So here's your budget. You had $200 a month, $200 US, right? And that was for my, farting around, for the lack of words, right? So I get there and I'm in the dorms, and my roommate was a guy coming out of UPenn. For some reason, he ended up in the same university in Daytona Beach, Florida that I was in, right? He transferred. But I come to find out later, that was his punishment. So his father punished him, by moving him out of UPenn to this other university in Florida. But the guy was loaded, right? So he wore the best clothes. He went shopping every day. The first 3 months that we were there together, he didn't have a car. His dad comes over, he buys him a brand new Lexus, a convertible Lexus, right? And he's living in the dorms with us, which is his punishment. So, I saw all that and I was like, wow, I want to be that, right? And I looked up to him from a materialistic point of view, for sure, but because I didn't have, all those things. And I said, I want to have that kind of life, and I'm not going to accept mediocrity, for the rest of my life. I got to do something to get to that level. I want to go into a store and be able to buy anything I want to buy without even thinking about it, right? So fast forward, when I started in my corporate career, I was hell bent on moving up the ladder, right? So I didn't care what people. I was so driven because I wanted this money. I wanted to be, financially free, if you will, right? And going back to my father, right? He always said, find a good job, work up the ladder if you wanted to go up in the ladder, but stay in that one company. I told him, I said, Dad, there's no way I'm going to do what you're going to do, right? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm just going to blow this out of the water, right? I'm not going to stay in one company. And I remember I stayed in that company for 15 years. And on the 10th year anniversary, there was this big thing. The owners came out. I was in Switzerland. They took us out for dinner. The ones who achieved that milestone gave us, I don't know, it was pens or something like that, gold-plated pens. And I called my dad. I was like, listen, I got this beautiful thing. It was a great event and all that stuff. And he was like, I thought you were not going to stay in that company for a long time. And you've already passed 10 years now, So going back to it, I got that work ethic from him. I got that, the idea of moving up, in a company from him, I would say. But at the same time, my mom is super entrepreneurial, right? So she was a teacher, basically in school, but she didn't want to do that working for the man or working for somebody else. And she started her own business. She had a tailoring shop in the start. And then when she realized that's not going to pay, a lot of money, she opened up her own school. She opened up 2 schools and she did very, very well. So I got that hustle and grind from her, And going back to your original question, how did I start in REI? When I finally left that corporate job, I thought to myself, I'm at a crossroads again. I'm coming in a new country. I can start from scratch. Because that's what they told me. They said, listen, you're coming in from abroad. You don't have any Canadian experience. What do? You got to start from scratch. So I left as a CFO from my company. They wanted me to start as an accountant or a financial analyst, right? So I had that option, or I could go my own way and do something different. And that's what I chose, right? Now, for sure, the business that I did, and I still have part of it, is hard. And you learn as you go, the mistakes that you make and so on and so forth. There's nobody to teach me. And entrepreneurship, most of businesses are like that, right? You learn from your mistakes. And as my bio said, 3 years into it, while I was still scrubbing toilets because nobody showed up to work, I said, man, I can't do this for the rest of my life. It don't work, right? So I got to find something different.
That was the same company?
No, that was my own business. So I started up a cleaning company. Yeah, I started up a cleaning company in Oakville called Oakville Butler and Office Boys. Oakville Butler was the residential piece. Office Boys is the commercial piece.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's how I started off my own. I didn't know anything about real estate investing. I had no clue, right? The only thing is I was lucky because when I left my corporate job, I got a golden handshake. So I had a chunk of money. When I came to Canada, I was able to buy a house, in 2013, Oakville. So by 2017, when I finally left, I had a huge amount of equity in the house, right?
Uh-huh.
So when I went to the Wealth Expo, after that day of cleaning the bathrooms, I was ready to go. I had this motivation. I had this drive. I was like, I need to find something else. And I went to that event. I said, this is it. Right. So I signed up for one of those classes. They do the 1 day course for like $500 or whatever. And then they get you in there and it's a 3 day course for another, $1,500. And then the big course is for $25,000.
Yeah.
I did that. And, it was the best thing ever. And even after that, I did the flipping course because that's the one I signed up for. I had no clue about RTO, about student rentals, about Airbnb, and all the other sources of income that you have. I never knew that, right? All I knew was flipping, and or that's what I learned, and that's what I got started in. So, yeah.
And so
I love it.
Yeah, how did that lead you to Detroit of all places? Then you're living in Oakville. And you sold your place there. You're living in Windsor now, so I geographically, you're pretty close.
Yeah.
But was it through that training program that got you into Windsor or Detroit, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So definitely, right. So flipping in Oakville, for a first timer, it's probably not the best idea, right? So that we bought, we cashed out. So once I went through the program, I was like, oh man, I'm sitting on this ton of equity. And again, I was in flip mode, right? At that time, I didn't know about renting or BRR strategy. I said, let me cash out, get all this money, let's do a flip. So I did a flip in Oakville, and of course, learning through my mistakes. I did every single mistake that you possibly could do. I think at the end of it, I lost 12 grand, right? So it took me 10 months. I bought a crappy house, on a nice street, but completely didn't calculate the ARV correctly. Went with the realtor who's not an investor, so didn't know the numbers, and so on and so forth, right? Went with a contractor who was coming out of Markham to Oakville, a GC. I was at the job site more than he was. so there's 20 grand at least over there for nothing. Found out that he's subcontracting when he told me that he had all the trades in house, so on and so forth. So anyway, long story short, I lost 12 grand, but yeah, for me, it's paid education, right? And I was talking to my coach at that time through that program, and he was saying, listen, man, the mistake you made was that, the money is made on the buy. It's not on the sell, right? When you're flipping, at least you got to buy right. So you got to find a market that, that allows you to buy, or there's a lower barrier to entry. So I took that on, and I drove to Buffalo. I did Hamilton. I looked in Kitchener-Waterloo, and all the Canadian markets. Unless you had cash sitting in your back, because at that time I never knew about joint ventures either. Unless you had $300,000-$400,000 sitting in your back pocket, you had to get a mortgage, right? So the entry barrier is still pretty high. And so when I looked at Buffalo, each home in Buffalo, the entry barrier is lower, but they're old homes. So a first-time flipper, you don't want to open up the walls and find this freaking nightmare, that you don't know what you're doing in another country. So that's when I started driving to Detroit, actually. I looked, it was not that far, 3 hours from Oakville. I went to every single meetup there, every single one, before I even bought my first property. And met the players, saw the guys who were coming out to these meetups consistently. And I think I did that for 3 months. And I just went up to these guys and I started talking to them. I was like, listen, I'm Canadian. I want to invest in your market. Why didn't you show me the ropes? One of those guys that I met, Todd Chun, shout out to Todd Chun if you're hearing this podcast. He came up to me and said, listen, if you want to do this, why don't you come and sit in my truck for 3 days and I'll just take you around. You see what I do. So, and that's what I did. So this guy he's a wholesaler. He has rental properties. He's a fix and flipper. He does everything, right? So for 3 days, from 8 o'clock in the morning to about 7 o'clock in the evening, I just sat in his truck and I went with him, seeing everything he did. And I learned so much. He said, at the end of it, if you like it and you like Detroit, we can do a deal. And that's how I got my first deal.
Mm-hmm. And how's that? You joint ventured with this guy, or what was that?
No, it's Detroit. It's cash. It's all cash. So just to give you some numbers.
So you did a wholesale deal with him?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
We wholesale the deal too. Yeah. That Oakville flip that I was talking about, I bought that house for $755,000.
Okay.
I put in another 150 into renos, right? So we are talking about 900. I think I sold it for 986 or something. So, but it took a long time to close. So I had holding costs and closing costs and whatnot. I lost money. That first flip that I did in Detroit, I bought the house for 40 grand.
Uh-huh.
Right.
40 grand, right? Cash. I put in, I think, 20 grand into it. So it was 60 all in. I sold that thing for like 120, if I'm not mistaken. It was 120. I made 25,000 US. I did it in 4 months. So, for me, the numbers just made it so much easier. And I said, if I want to scale up my business and this is what I want to do full time, I got to lower my barrier to entry. Now the business has changed a little bit more because, it's not my own money anymore, but, the concept is still the same, right?
And so do you use a realtor there, or do you still just buy from this wholesaler? How do you know which areas are good?
Yeah. No, so I use only wholesalers, right? I don't have the energy, the time, or the will to go knocking on doors or putting up whatever, marketing and whatnot. So I get the deals coming to me. They know my criteria now. They know, okay, this guy's Canadian. I'm going to go into these markets. Through the experience, I've been doing it for 2 years now. I know the markets that I work in, right? Or I want to work in. So I look at market fundamentals, of course. The sub-markets are so different, even within one city, as you guys know. So there's only 2 or 3 markets that sub-markets, I should say, that I go into. Number one criteria: don't get shot. So that's the first and foremost thing. I want a safe neighborhood. People want to move in, their families want to move in there. Days on market is low, so on and so forth. So all that stuff, my realtor does for me. So when I get deals from wholesalers and they meet my first 5 criteria, I pass that on. It goes to the next bucket, obviously, and then that's my realtor who does the comp analysis and so on and so forth. So as you know, real estate investing is all about your power team, all about your power. And if your team is good, then for sure you can scale up.
So then your realtor knows that you're going to end up selling with him. You're going to list it on MLS with him afterwards, and that's and that's how you give back to him for the work that he's doing with your comps and whatnot. Exactly.
As Canadians, for the U.S., at least for Detroit, I can't comment for other Americans, but for Detroit, we have money. So compared to what they have, right? So you do a deal, you do 2 deals, they know you're going to close, so they want to work with you. Right? Mm-hmm. When I first started, there's a lot of people to talk, right? But then when you bring the money to the table and you do close, that's what they want. So.
How do you source, and do you just find them through the network that I assume for the contractors and that sort of stuff? Has that ever had any issues with that? Or because I assume you're not there every day watching over what they're doing, right?
Yeah. Tell me who hasn't had issues with contractors. that guy's
I've never had any issues with contractors ever. No.
He must be a multi-millionaire.
Just a lot of learning opportunities, no issue.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
All through, for the most part, through referrals. So as I said, I'm present in every single meetup there. That's the way to go. It's free. It's $10-$20 at the door. You can't go wrong because the value you get out of those things is amazing. So a lot of the contractors I use, most of them I would say is through referrals. My electrician, actually, funny story is that I couldn't find one, or the one that I was using was busy at that time and I needed something to get done urgently. So I was listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, and somebody suggested there that, go to Home Depot and just sit there in the morning, early morning. And, the guys who are coming in there, the contractors, those are the guys you want to work with because they're not drunk already, or they're not high, or, they're busy, right? So they come in early in the morning, 6:30. So that's what I did. I went to Home Depot and I sat there, in the morning, and I took my Starbucks coffee and I was walking up and down the electrical aisle and I started talking to a guy, and that's it. And now he's my contractor. He's my electrician. Come to find out, he's actually a city inspector, and he does work on the side, like after he knocks off his full-time job. So
that's great. Okay, so you mentioned $40,000 as the purchase price for your first place. I don't know if the numbers are the same. Why don't you run us through your most recent deal? What the numbers look like on that one?
Okay, so one I'm finishing off right now. So yeah, definitely from the first deal to now, there has been some evolution because, again, the neighborhoods change, right? Or the neighborhoods, I've refined my processes and the places that I want to invest in. So, but not too far. So the one I'm going to be getting done with very soon, I bought that property for $58,000 US. So all the numbers we're talking about US, yeah, $58,000 US. I had a budget of $50,000 for reno. It has actually now come up to $60,000, unfortunately, because we had a few break-ins in there. But yeah, so 58 purchase, 60 reno, and the ARV is 165.
Okay. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. So you minus closing costs and whatnot, it's about 30 grand in profit. And that's usually, the mark that I try to hit.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't see at least 30 grand, this one was actually better. It should have been 40, but as I said, we had some unforeseen costs there. But if I can't see 30 grand in a project, I won't even touch it. So.
And is it tough to find those numbers? Like, is it just because of your wholesaler and whatnot that you can do this?
It's getting tougher. I can't say it's low hanging fruit as they were a couple of years ago, because the competition is getting more and more as people come back to Detroit. Initially, there was no competition because the local Detroit people didn't have 100 grand to put in the house. It was not that was not there. I mean, when I started off that first house, I didn't even put granite countertops. I didn't put appliances. Now I know if I don't do that, my houses are going to stay longer in the market. Mm-hmm. Right? So the market is shifting a little bit. So these kind of deals, you do find them. I want to say I'll find at least one a month, one good one a month, right? So it's possible, but it's getting harder for sure. For sure.
And what is it like to sell in that market? Is it obviously if the prices are that low, who's coming in and buying the flipped version? How long is that taking? And is there any challenges around that?
Yeah, challenges for sure. Most of my homes are sold to first time buyers, right? So that's the neighborhoods that I focus in, and so there's a little bit of different when it comes to financing in the States. They have a little bit of a different system than we have here, right? So they have the conventional like we have, right? But then they have something called FHA and VA, and these are basically state-backed loans. So in case the buyer defaults or can't make his payments, the state of Michigan will actually come in and pay off the lender or take care of some of the payments. Now, a couple of things. These are really pro buyer, so they can come down to up to 2% down payment, which is freaking amazing. I wish we had that here, right? Mm-hmm. However, from the seller point of view, it gets a little bit harder because they make you jump through all these hoops, right? So let's say it's an FHA buyer on your home. They send out an inspector, and the inspector comes in and he makes a big checklist of things, stupid like nitty-gritty stuff that you have to take care of. Then I got to bring my contractor back in who wants the big job, who doesn't want the small little snag list to take care of. He'll take a week, he'll do that, whatever. Then we got to call the inspector back. The inspector is busy, he's going to take another 2 weeks. He comes back, okay, he signs off, and then the appraiser comes. And the appraiser for us, as we know, is he's appraising the value of the house. But in the States, the FHA appraiser, he's also an inspector. So he'll come back and he'll say, okay, this is the value of the house. Oh, but by the way, the inspector missed all these things, which you need to get done. So we got to do that again, right? So it's a rigmarole. So unfortunately, that delays the project. And I always tell my investors when I'm in for the renos, I'm in and out between 6 to 8 weeks. That's all it takes me, right, to do the work. But there's another, I would say, 4 to 8 weeks before you can actually close on a house because of this issue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, that's still not an unreasonable, period of time to do a flip.
No.
Right?
From an investor point of view and the returns we're talking about, right? You on the worst end, it's months from a timeline point of view. From an investor point of view, the returns are awesome. Still,
yeah.
For me, I can't. If I have a couple of these homes sitting on the market, obviously that's tying up my funds too, right? So when I'm trying to scale up my business, I got to juggle these things for sure.
So can you talk a little bit about the returns then? I know you work with some investors, you bring them in some sort of a partnership, right? And what kind of expectations should they have if they partner up with you?
Yeah, I mean, awesome question. So as my business has evolved, I have 2 different types of investors, right? So I have the JV partners, who want, a split of the profits. And for these guys, what I say is that, from the numbers we talked about, generally speaking, I'm aiming to hit 30 grand in profit, right, within 6 months. So they bring in all the money. and then I give them a mortgage out of the house, right? So that's how they secure their funds. And they get basically 50% of the profits at the end of 6 months. So if you calculate, that's 15% returns. But most of these guys actually want to learn this, right? So they're like, okay, Detroit, exciting. There's money there. I want to JV with you because, we don't know about the city, but we want to start doing this ourselves, right? So a lot of these type of partners of mine, they're actually coming out. They're coming out with the projects. They're seeing my team. They're learning, how to do a flip and so on and so forth, making the connections. I take them out to the meetups. They meet other investors. They meet other wholesalers and so on and so forth in the hope that they're going to start doing this themselves, right? And then I have now, I would say in this year, I have a different type of investor who is basically a silent partner. That's what I call him, but he's a money partner. And they don't care about the actual returns. I shouldn't say that. They don't care about the profits. They want interest, right? So for these investors, they just bring in the money and it's like, okay, 15% in 6 months. And I'm good with that, right? So they don't care about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, where I'm doing it, and so on and so forth, as long as they get their returns. Which
right, that's a much better for you. That's a much better system.
Yeah, yes and no. I like the teaching aspect as well because I find the benefits of being in real estate investing, and I want to spread that word to as much people as possible. Want to be from their 9 to 5 and so on and so forth. I'm no coach by any means, but I like to. I'm one of those who I'm a leader, on the field, right? So if you see what I'm doing and you like what I'm doing, then hopefully you learn something from that as well. But yeah, no, from a hassle point of view, definitely the money partners where they want only interest. That's the best case for sure.
Uh-huh. Now, don't you think that you could find those same numbers in Windsor? Or is it the draw of the other market, like the Detroit, the U.S. market, that brings your investors to you, do you think?
I think so. There's a certain sexiness, associated with Detroit, right? Mm-hmm. There's a risk that people are like, oh, wow, we've heard about Detroit. They went bankrupt. You might get killed there. And I think that generates a lot of interest, right? Versus, we know the Canadian market. It's very boring in the sense of, okay, you make money, but you just, you invest and that's it. You sit on it, right? There's no sexiness to it, right? But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but for sure, there's definitely more interest in Detroit.
Yeah, I think maybe on the other side of that too, though, you're mitigating the risk a little bit with the flip in Detroit, because you might buy that same house in Windsor for, instead of 58, it's 258, right? Yeah. And you may make 30 grand off of it, but the numbers are higher to start out with. So a little more risk there, I guess.
No, for sure. For the entry barrier is always a great motivator, right? So.
And now you do tours of Detroit as well. You'll take investors down and show them the same way that this guy did with you. And maybe they're not spending 3 days in your truck, but they do get a lot of insight, right? So tell us about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's all about giving back, man. It's like what you guys do, again, going back to how we started this conversation. I want to give back because if it wasn't for Todd, taking me out for those 3 days, I probably wouldn't have had the guts to invest in Detroit, So I want to do the same. Like Canadian investors, we have so much opportunity in our own country, but right next door, there's a lot of opportunity as well, right? And there's so much benefits, and maybe we'll touch on that as well when it comes to tax and so on and so forth, that drives you there. But a lot of people are scared. A lot of people don't have the knowledge, right? Education is power. So I want to give back definitely to anybody who's interested in Detroit or U.S. investing as a whole, to come out and see, because they have the fear. Okay, where am I going to go in Detroit? Like, I don't know the place. I can look in Google Maps. I can look on MLS and look at the houses, but I'm not driving these streets, right? So I bring them out on the weekend. Usually, if they're coming out from Toronto, I tell them, listen, come out on a Friday night or a Saturday night. Stay in my house. I got a guest bedroom. spend time with me and my family, and then the next morning we'll actually go there. We'll take a drive. I'll show you the best neighborhoods that I like to invest in. If I have a project which is running, for the most part I do all the time. So we'll go to that project, and we'll see what I do there. How I flip, like the finishes that is expected in that market. We'll run through the numbers so they get the idea of actual numbers while we're standing in the property. If my contractors are there, they get to meet them too. If we can stick a meeting while they're there, then we do that as well, so they can see other investors. There's a lot of activity going on, right? So generally, they get much more comfortable when they come out to these meetings, right? Or these tours. So.
And what's the idea behind the tour? Like, why are you doing it? Is it so that people can see what you're doing, maybe invest with you, or is it just, hey, I'm giving back. I want to show what's helped me, and you can come out and you can learn. You can do this too.
Yeah, both, right? I mean, if I have to be honest, of course, I want people to invest in me, right? That's the key. But at the same time, I've had other guys who've come out to those tours and say, listen, I want to do it myself. Can I hang out with you for a couple of days? And that's cool too, right? So definitely, joint ventures is something that, explodes my business. And I want to give back to those people who are interested in that. But at the same time, if they want to learn, I'm all game for that too.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, and how often do you do them?
As and when, really. So I have a calendar. Usually it's on the weekend, I want to say, because most people coming out of Toronto have to make a trip out here, and it's hard to drive three hours, do Detroit, and then drive another 3 hours back home. So usually it happens on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and I think we'll put in the show notes. I'll send you my calendar link, and people who wanna set that up. Actually, what I do is I do like a 45-minute phone call before, just to try to understand their needs and why they want to do this, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to waste my time either, right? So if it's just Detroit is interesting, I want to go see, then, we have to rethink something else, right?
Right. They can go drive through it themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? And I'm pretty blunt with that, and that's the idea of that. But, they have real strong interest and want to invest in Detroit, then for sure.
Mm-hmm. What would you be able to give us a picture just of some of your pictures of your flip that you're involved in right now as well? We can put them in the show notes too.
Oh yeah.
Just so that people can get an idea, like, because when we're talking about a house, right? Like, I'm always envisioning that bungalow, the 3 bedrooms upstairs, the one that I would put 2 bedrooms in the basement. Like, that's what I picture. So maybe that's not the case, right? It might be a completely different type of house. Like, I don't know what kind of thing we're talking about. So, we could discuss that as well, I suppose. But, would you be willing to just put some pictures or send us some pictures and we can put them in too?
Absolutely, we can do that. And if people want to click on my social media, so I'm big on YouTube. I try and record everything I do there. So you'll see the actual action of the flips on my YouTube channel. But going back to the houses, that actually does a great point. So the single family bungalow, Hamilton Mountain type home, that's not what we're working with. We are working with Victorian Tudors, something that you would see in Toronto proper, between 1,800 to 2,500 square foot homes, 2 stories, beautiful, beautiful homes. I'm not lying, eh? And a lot of these homes have been just left abandoned when the financial crisis happened in 2007. People couldn't pay the mortgage. They just left. They just upped and left. And these houses are, beautiful homes, again, that, become like ghost towns, right? And now people are coming back. So they want to come back in these communities. They want these beautiful homes, and we're just trying to revive them, man. Like, once we're done with the work, I would buy these homes. I mean, typically the same home, you pick that home from Detroit and you put that in Toronto, you would pay nothing less than $1.5 million, 1.5 million. And there's some, 150, 165, 70,000. So
I'm wondering why, and what's your take on it? Or maybe some pros and cons in your mind around active business, more like flipping and that strategy, versus buying and holding, more of a passive long-term game sort of approach. What's your take on? You're focusing mostly on flips, right? So,
Yeah.
What's your take on those two strategies?
Well, yeah. Well, so I do both, eh? So I actively flip in Detroit, and I say as soon as I close the project, I take the money and I run. that's but yeah, I actually do that. So I buy and hold in Windsor. And this comes from just from a tax efficiency point of view, where basically, you have different tax rates, obviously, for your active business and your passive business, and you can claim a lot more and so on and so forth, right? So I must say that up to 2019, that's what I was doing, right? So I was making money on my flips. I'm buying and holding in Windsor. I got a few properties here, which are cash flowing amazing, by the way. But in 2020, that might change. Not might change. I think I'm definitely going to do something different, where I'm going to buy and hold in the U.S. And the reason for that is because, for if you don't know or your listeners don't know, there's something called the 1031 exchange in the U.S., where basically, the capital gains that you make from your flips is not is tax exempt if you reinvest that into another property, right? So of course there's some rules behind that, but what that means is that I can do, let's say, 5 flips, make, I don't know, 150 grand, go and buy an investment property or buy a rental property, all cash, get rent in US dollars, and sit proper, right, and not pay a dime of tax for that purchase, which is an awesome concept, and I think more and more people should be looking at that, because just to save some money and expand their portfolio, right? Going back to your question, Sandy, that's another thing. I try to mitigate my risk by doing the flip in Detroit, because the flipping game is there's so much complexities with that, let alone the actual work involved. But if the market turns, and you're stuck with, I don't know, 5-10 properties, you're screwed, man, right? It could go from, I don't know, a couple of mil to nothing overnight, right? So that's why I try and split my hedge my bets, right? So I do that flipping business, active business in Detroit, take that money, buy and hold in Windsor, just to mitigate that risk.
What market are you thinking of buying and holding in the States? Detroit?
No, not Detroit, because there are better markets. There are more secure markets, right? Affordability is a big thing. I would love to do something in Texas. I would love to, but those are expensive markets. You're not looking at getting anything less than a couple of $100,000, right? A good property. But if you look at Toledo in Ohio, for example, that's a very good market. From a rental point of view, you can still get in. You can buy a duplex for 70-80 grand, which cash flows. So there are a few places for sure.
Okay. What has been one of your biggest challenges, and how did you overcome it?
Ooh.
Yeah, we like these kind of questions, right? We got to get the challenges.
Yeah.
It's not all peaches and cream.
Yeah. So there's something called the Detroit factor, right? If you talk to any investor in Detroit, there's a Detroit factor. And what that is basically the fact that you can get robbed anytime, multiple times, right? So you never get used to it. Now I've been robbed so many times, and I'm still not used to it, right? So the last one happened actually a couple of days ago, in fact, where they broke in and they stole everything, right? Which is a pain in the butt. But what I realized is that you can mitigate that too. Okay, so for the most part, what they come for is the furnace and the hot water tank. Okay, now being the summer, you don't have to put the furnace in. So most of these homes that I'm buying, they don't have the mechanicals, right? You're putting the mechanicals in there. So, for example, now in the summer, I wouldn't put the furnace in, okay, until the end of the project. Or in the closing, I would say that, okay, once the house is sold, then I would do the mechanicals. I would put the mechanicals in there, right? So that's a way of mitigating it. This particular recent incident, unfortunately, I had bought all this material. So vanities, light fixtures, faucets, appliances. and most of them were not yet installed, so they were brand new inboxes, and that's easy money. So I'm trying out a new alarm system. We'll see what happens, but yeah, so that's a big thing in Detroit. You gotta they say you gotta have a thick-skinned approach there. It's going to happen. You gotta put that in your project costs. Just that's the only way. Accept the fact that you're gonna lose a couple of grand because of that stuff, but you never get used to it, man. It's like every time it happens, you're like, damn, I just lost some money there.
Sure. Yeah, that's awful. Well, I know what it feels like to come out to my car and just go, I don't remember throwing everything on the floor like that. And then you kind of go, oh, right, somebody's been rooting through it. And that doesn't feel good. So I'm sure that the level that you're speaking on, losing all that stuff, cannot be fun.
Yeah.
So now it says here that you've successfully sued one of the suburbs, Romulus, a suburb of Detroit. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Man, that was a crazy story. So that was actually my first flip. So it's in the suburb of Romulus. We had done the work, and then exactly what we talked about with the FHA buyer, I had the snag list, right? So in my mind, the work was done, and I left. I came back home. So at that point, I was still in Oakville. I was not in Windsor. And then I had all this snag list that I had to address. So I called my contractor up and I said, "Listen, I can't come out. You got to go and do all this stuff, right?" So he was doing all this stuff. He didn't tell me nothing. He didn't tell me anything. And my neighbor of that house, I had given him my number. He calls me one day. He said, "Listen, there's a tag on the door that says that if you don't cut the grass, the city's going to cut it for you, and it's like $250 or something, right?" So I'm like, okay, I'm in Oakville. I'm not going to do a 4-hour drive or 3.5-hour drive just to go get the grass cut, right? So let the city cut it. I'm fine with that. The house is sold now, right? I'm just waiting to close on this thing. So sure enough, they came and cut it. And when it comes to closing, the title company says, "Hey, listen, there's a $500 or $600 lien on the house from the city because they cut the grass." I was like, hold on a second. They did it one time, but they're charging me $600. So I go to the city and I was like, okay, I want to find out what this is. And this guy was having a shitty day or something. He was like pissed off with the world, right? And he wouldn't cooperate. And he's a city employee, right? He didn't want to talk to me, right? And I was so mad because the closing is, I think, in a couple of days, and this thing is pending. It's holding up the whole thing, and I wanted to pay this off. So I said, "Listen, just take $250. Give me a receipt." So now they charged me $600. I paid another $250. I got this receipt, and we go after the closing. And then the closing, they say this thing is still on record, and you've not cleared this. I'm like, man. So we had to get an extension for the closing, and now I'm going back and forth from Oakville, right? So I'm like right up to here at this point, and I go back to the city, and I'm like, listen, I put out all these receipts and so on and so forth, and they're like, nope, you didn't pay. It's not settled, and I lost at this point. So I walk across, I get out of the city hall, whatever it's called, and I go to the court, which is right next door, and I was like, listen, how do I sue somebody? Because I've heard in America you can sue anybody at any time. So I was like, yeah, fill in this form. It costs $25. So I put in the information, and I taken this guy's name down, and I put their city of Romulus, and this is the guy. And when I gave it to the court, just the person at the court, they're like, "You're suing the city?" I was like, "Yes, I'm suing the city." I was like, okay, whatever. So she gave me the receipt and all that. And I go back with this. I knew it was going to take forever, right, to get this thing in court or whatever. I just wanted to threaten this guy. So I went back and I was like, here it is. I'm serving you right now. I'm suing you, to this guy at the teller. And that's when he shat himself, right? He got scared, obviously, right? So he went and called his boss. And the boss came back, and we sat out, me, his boss, and that guy for like an hour solving this thing. And finally, they found out that they misappropriated the funds or whatever. They put in the wrong accounts and so on and so forth. And we got it all reconciled, and they set me off. And I was like, okay. Then I went back and I took off the case for them. So I successfully sued the city, and I won.
Perfect. And it costs $25. So not too bad. Not too bad.
I had a lot of time.
All right. Well, I'm sure we could talk all day. Let's just go right into it. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about Detroit and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm huge on social media, or at least I try to be. So my handle is real estate investor Sav. So all one word, no spaces, real estate investor Sav. And you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. So that's the best way to get in touch with me. You'll see all my stuff there. I try to post as much as possible, the challenges as well. And then if anybody wants to send me a mail, it's Sav, S-A-V, at realestateinvestorsav.com. So pretty straightforward. And if you want to organize one of those Detroit tours and you want to just ask some questions, then by all means, go there and we can hook it up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, well, we're going to put all that information in the show notes as usual. So if you are driving or whatever and didn't have time to jot that down, just go over to breakthroughreipodcast.ca, click on Savio's interview, and then all the show notes will be there, and you can just you'll be able to get in touch with them. All that stuff's going to be right there. So thanks again, man. Really looking forward to seeing some of the pictures of your flip and that kind of thing. So there's been a lot of information here, and I'm pretty excited about the market. I haven't done flips. I said to myself, you know what, I'm done with that, because the appreciation was just it was rivaling the amount of money that I could make, just over that 3-4 months that I was working. So, or the 3 months or 4 months after that, when I realized, geez, I didn't really have to do any of these renovations, and the house would have been more than I sold it for. So I kind of went, I'm done with flips for now. But this has sort of given me a different perspective, right? A way that you can make some active real estate investing, exciting kind of stuff. And thanks again. Anything to add to that, Sandy?
No, it was awesome. Detroit's great to hear about a different market, and love seeing Canadians being a little bit creative and finding ways to make stuff happen, because I love that they just went there and found the people, right? A lot of people struggle with doing anything in this business. So this happens too slow for them, and really it's about taking action, right? And taking some of these thoughts that we've learned today, but going out there and meeting people, going to meetup clubs, getting stuff done, and get the power team going and just go, right? I think it seems like you're a pretty great example of that, as you just went into a new market, knew nobody, and then within a year or less, probably you're crushing it and providing great opportunities for other investors who should reach out to you about that if they're interested, for sure.
Well, it's like one of those things that they always say, right? Like if you decide to go and invest in Detroit, now all of a sudden, all of those roadblocks just magically appear, right? But what you did is you went down and you figured out how to get through them all. So, I mean, it's the same case with anyone doing anything like this anywhere. So congratulations and kudos for sticking to it and, learning what needed to be done. Not taking those roadblocks as a reason to quit, but something that needed to be overcome. So thanks again, man. Really appreciate it. Sandy, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks, Sav. Get in touch with me, 289-389-6846 or info@mckayrealtynetwork.com. Perfect.
Anyone interested can get in touch with me. They can call me at 289-927-0464. And Sav, you want to say again real quick?
Real Estate Investor Sav. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
Okay. Well, everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll hear you all next time. Sorry, Sandy, you had something else?
No, absolutely not. Just go for it. Sign off. Talk to everyone soon.
We'll see you next time. Bye, guys.